I never thought a single decision could change the entire direction of my life, but looking back now, it's almost unbelievable how quickly everything began to shift. My name is Adil, and for most of my life I lived quietly in the background, trying to fit into a world that never quite felt like mine. Growing up, I followed all the rules, wore all the clothes expected of me, and smiled when people praised me for being a good son. But behind that smile was a storm I could barely contain. I always felt a quiet pull toward something softer, something freer, something that existed beyond the boxes people tried to place me in. I didn't have the words for it then, but I carried it like a secret heartbeat, steady and persistent. The first time I ever tried on something feminine, it wasn't a grand act of rebellion. It was late at night, and I was alone in my cousin's room while visiting for the summer. She had left a silky pink scarf on the chair. My hands trembled as I picked it up, the fabric sliding like water between my fingers. I wrapped it around my shoulders and stared into the mirror. For a single breath, the world went silent. It wasn't just the color or the softness. It was the way it felt like a missing piece slipping quietly into place. I remember thinking, this is me. This is who I am, even though I couldn't fully understand why. Years passed, and life became a careful balancing act. By day, I played the part everyone expected. By night, when the house slept, I would sneak into my own small collection of scarves and blouses I had secretly bought. Each time I slipped them on, I felt a strange mixture of relief and terror. Relief because I finally felt whole. Terror because I knew what people would say if they ever found out. I became an expert at hiding, at folding myself into a version that felt safe but never true. Yet the secret kept growing, like a seed pushing stubbornly through concrete, demanding light. Everything changed the day I saw the message on my phone. It was an advertisement, just a random sponsored post while scrolling late at night. It showed a smiling woman talking about body transformation, about discovering confidence and becoming who you were always meant to be. At first, I tried to scroll past it, but something about her eyes stopped me. She looked free. My heart pounded as I read every word of the caption. It wasn't just about appearance, it was about identity, about embracing your real self. The idea clung to me like a shadow. Could I ever be that brave? For weeks I couldn't shake it. I started reading articles, watching stories of people who had transformed their lives, not to escape who they were, but to finally be who they were. I found forums and late-night chats where people shared their journeys with a kind of honesty I had never experienced before. They spoke of fear, of family rejection, but also of joy, deep, unstoppable joy. I began to imagine what it would feel like to finally stop hiding. To wake up and see my reflection and not feel like a stranger was staring back. The real turning point came quietly. I was sitting at my desk one rainy evening, the soft patter against the window matching the restless rhythm of my thoughts. I opened my drawer and pulled out a small, worn envelope where I kept a few photographs of myself dressed in the clothes I loved. Looking at them, I felt both proud and heartbroken. Proud because those photos were proof of my courage. Heartbroken because they were hidden, like a beautiful painting locked away in a dark room. My eyes filled with tears as I whispered to myself, I can't keep living like this. It wasn't a dramatic decision. It was a quiet acceptance. I booked an appointment at a local clinic that specialized in safe, non-surgical body enhancements. My hands shook as I typed my name, but when I hit confirm, I felt a calm I had never known before. It wasn't just about the physical change. It was a promise to myself that I would no longer bury the person I truly was. The days leading up to the appointment were a blur of emotions. Fear, excitement, doubt, hope. They swirled together until I could barely tell them apart. Some nights I lay awake, imagining what I would look like, how it would feel. Other nights, panic gripped me. What if I regret this? What if people find out? But every time the doubts tried to drown me, a stronger voice whispered back, this is your life, your truth. When the morning finally came, I stood in front of the mirror and studied my reflection one last time before stepping out the door. The face staring back was familiar but tired, like a character I had played for too long. I touched the glass lightly, as if saying goodbye to an old friend. Then I turned, took a deep breath and left. The clinic was quiet and softly lit, the air carrying a faint scent of lavender. The receptionist smiled warmly, her eyes kind but knowing, as if she had seen countless people arrive with the same mix of fear and determination. As I sat in the waiting area, my heart pounded so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. I clutched my bag, filled not just with documents but with years of hidden dreams. When they finally called my name, my legs felt heavy, but I forced myself to stand. The consultation was gentle and reassuring. The doctor spoke calmly, explaining every detail of the procedure, the safety measures, the recovery process. I nodded, barely able to absorb the words, my mind focused on one single thought. This is really happening. As I signed the final consent form, my hands trembled, but my heart felt light, as if I were finally setting something free. When I left the clinic that evening, the sky had turned a deep shade of violet. The air smelled of rain, and the city lights shimmered like 1,000 tiny promises. I wrapped my scarf tighter around my shoulders, feeling a quiet warmth spread through me. I wasn't transformed yet, not physically, but something inside me had already shifted. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was walking toward myself instead of away. The days after the consultation moved in a strange rhythm, slow yet electric, as if time itself was aware of the change waiting just beyond the horizon. Every morning I woke with a nervous flutter in my chest, my mind bouncing between anticipation and fear. The clinic had given me a date, one clear circle on my calendar that felt both impossibly far away and terrifyingly close. I would stare at it each night, my fingers brushing the paper as if the simple act of touching it might give me strength. Told no one. Not a single friend, not a single family member. This journey felt too delicate, too personal to risk with careless words. I began preparing in quiet ways that only I could recognize. I cleaned my room more carefully than usual, folding clothes with an almost ceremonial focus, as if creating order outside might bring peace inside. I spent hours online, reading recovery tips, watching transformation stories, soaking up every detail until they became part of my breath. Some nights I whispered to myself in the dark, practicing what I might say to strangers if they ever asked about my new appearance. But mostly I stayed silent, holding my secret like a fragile bird in my hands. The night before the procedure, sleep refused to come. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the moonlight washing the room in a pale glow. My thoughts raced in loops, memories of childhood, of scarves hidden in drawers, of all the years I spent hiding behind a mask I never wanted. I imagined waking up after everything was done, imagined the first time I would look into the mirror and see not just a reflection but recognition. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might shake the walls. At some point I must have drifted into a restless dream, because the next thing I knew, my alarm was ringing. The day had arrived. The clinic felt different that morning. It wasn't just the warm scent of lavender or the soft music humming through the hallways. It was me. I walked through those glass doors with a steadiness I hadn't felt before. The receptionist greeted me with the same gentle smile, but this time I met her eyes and smiled back. I filled out the last forms, my pen gliding across the paper with surprising calm. My hands weren't trembling anymore. Somewhere between the sleepless night and the rising sun, my fear had softened into resolve. When the nurse led me to the preparation room, my heart gave a sudden leap. The walls were painted a soft cream, the air cool but comforting. I changed into the provided gown, folding my clothes neatly on the chair, each movement deliberate, like stepping across an invisible threshold. The doctor entered, her voice warm and steady as she explained each step again. I listened carefully, nodding when she asked if I was ready. I whispered a quiet yes, the word barely audible but carrying every ounce of courage I possessed. As they guided me to the procedure room, I caught my reflection in a small wall mirror. For a moment I paused. The person staring back looked both familiar and entirely new. My eyes shone with something I hadn't seen before, a quiet determination, a spark of the life I had been chasing all these years. I took a deep breath and let the door close behind me. The next moments blurred into a soft haze of voices, gentle lights, and the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. I remember the doctor's reassuring words, the nurse's kind touch on my arm, and the faint scent of lavender lingering even as the world slowly faded. I thought of every secret I had ever kept, every quiet dream I had buried, and let them all go like paper lanterns drifting into the night. When I awoke, it was as if time had folded in on itself. The room was calm, the lights low, and a soft blanket covered me like a protective cocoon. My chest felt different, heavier, tender but not painful. The nurse smiled as she checked my vitals, her voice soothing as she explained that everything had gone perfectly. I listened, but my mind was already reaching for the mirror across the room. They helped me sit up slowly, careful not to strain. My heart pounded as I turned toward the mirror, unsure if I was ready yet desperate to see. At first, all I could see was the bandaging, but even through the careful wrappings I could feel it, the subtle weight, the undeniable presence of change. Tears pricked my eyes before I could stop them. It wasn't about the size or the shape. It was about the truth. For the first time, my body was beginning to reflect the person who had always lived inside me. The nurse squeezed my hand and told me to rest, to take it slow, but her words floated around me like distant music. I could barely hear her over the steady drum of my own heartbeat. I lay back against the pillows, letting the warmth of the blanket and the quiet hum of the room surround me. Every fear, every doubt that had haunted me for years seemed to fade into the background, replaced by a fragile but undeniable joy. Later that evening, as they discharged me with careful instructions, I stepped out into the cool night air. The city lights flickered like tiny stars scattered across the dark, and the scent of rain lingered in the breeze. I clutched the soft fabric of my coat close to my chest, not just for warmth but to protect the delicate beginning of my new life. The streets looked the same, but I knew nothing would ever be the same again. That night, lying in my own bed, I touched the edge of the bandage and felt a surge of emotion so strong it brought fresh tears to my eyes. This was more than a physical transformation. It was a declaration, a quiet but powerful statement that I was no longer willing to hide. My heart whispered the words I had never dared to speak aloud. This is me. This is my life. Recovery became its own kind of journey, a quiet test of patience and self-discovery. The first few mornings after the procedure were filled with gentle routines, carefully changing bandages, sipping warm tea, listening to the soft hum of the ceiling fan as I tried to rest. My chest felt tender, a new weight settling into place with every heartbeat. Each small movement reminded me that something profound had shifted inside me. It wasn't just the physical sensation. It was the knowledge that my body now carried a truth I had hidden for so long. In those early days, I spent hours in front of the mirror, studying every detail with a careful, almost reverent attention. At first, the bandages concealed most of the change, but even through the layers of gauze I could sense it, the soft curve, the subtle rise that hadn't been there before. I would trace the edges lightly with my fingertips, not to check for flaws but to remind myself that this was real. Sometimes I cried without warning, overwhelmed by the simple fact that the person I had always imagined was finally beginning to take shape. But recovery was not without its challenges. There were moments when the soreness became sharp, when the weight of my decision pressed against me like a quiet question. Late at night, when the house was silent and the city lights flickered through my window, doubts would creep in. What if this changes how people see me? What if I can't explain? What if I never feel complete? I would lie awake, listening to the sound of my own breathing, and remind myself why I had chosen this path. This wasn't about anyone else's approval. This was about finally living in a body that felt like home. As the days passed, the swelling began to fade, revealing more of the transformation beneath. The first time I removed the bandages completely, my breath caught in my throat. There they were. My new breasts, delicate and perfectly mine. The sight stole the air from my lungs. They weren't just a change in appearance. They were a reflection of my courage, a symbol of every silent night I had spent dreaming of authenticity. My hands trembled as I touched them, not in disbelief, but in recognition. I whispered softly to my reflection, "Hello. I've been waiting for you." That evening I dressed carefully, choosing a soft cream blouse that draped gently over my chest. It was a simple outfit, nothing extravagant, but as I buttoned it, I felt a thrill rush through me. The fabric rested against my skin in a way that felt completely new, completely right. When I stepped back from the mirror, I barely recognized the person staring back. My eyes shone brighter, my posture carried a quiet confidence, and for the first time, the reflection and the soul inside it matched. Stepping outside for the first time after recovery was like entering a world that had been waiting for me all along. The air felt different, crisp and alive, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the nearby park. People walked past me without a second glance, each lost in their own lives, and yet I felt every movement, every breath, with a sharpness I had never known before. I wasn't hiding anymore. Even if no one around me knew the full story, I carried it in the way I held my shoulders, in the calm steadiness of my steps. I decided to take a slow walk through the neighborhood, letting the evening breeze wrap around me like a soft promise. With every step, the quiet fears that had once chained me began to loosen. I thought of the countless nights I had spent imagining this feeling, of walking in the world as myself, not a performance but a truth. It was both exhilarating and peaceful, a gentle awakening that hummed beneath my skin. Over the next weeks, I began to rebuild my daily life around this new reality. Simple tasks, making breakfast, answering messages, folding laundry, felt different because I felt different. The world hadn't changed, but the way I inhabited it had. When I caught my reflection in shop windows or the shiny surface of a passing car, I no longer flinched or looked away. Instead, I met my own eyes and smiled, a small, private smile meant only for me. Yet, even in this quiet joy, there were moments of uncertainty. Friends started noticing subtle changes, my softer silhouette, the glow in my expression, the way I carried myself with a new ease. Some offered casual compliments without realizing the deeper truth, while others tilted their heads with silent curiosity. I chose my words carefully when questions arose, offering gentle explanations about self-discovery and personal growth. Most accepted it with warmth, but a few seemed uneasy, their smiles a little too tight. It hurt, but it didn't stop me. I had spent too many years hiding to let fear silence me again. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with streaks of gold, I sat by my window and thought about everything that had brought me to this moment. The secret nights of dressing in hidden clothes, the trembling hand that booked the appointment, the quiet hours of recovery. All of it had led here. I realized that my transformation wasn't just about my body. It was about claiming a life I had once thought impossible. My new breasts weren't simply a feature. They were a declaration that I existed, fully and unapologetically. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was only beginning. But as I watched the last light fade from the horizon, a deep, steady calm settled over me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for permission to be myself. I was already living it, one heartbeat at a time. The first true test of my transformation came unexpectedly, during an invitation I almost declined. A close friend from university, Miriam, had been planning a small gathering to celebrate her new job. We hadn't seen each other in months, and she insisted I join. My instinct was to hide, to stay wrapped in the comfort of my private world a little longer, but something inside whispered that it was time. Time to step fully into the life I had been building in quiet shadows. The evening of the gathering arrived with a nervous flutter that felt almost like excitement. I stood in front of my wardrobe for what seemed like hours, running my fingers over soft fabrics and delicate colors I had carefully collected over the past weeks. After much hesitation, I chose a light lavender blouse that hugged my new curves gently, paired with a pair of dark jeans that balanced subtlety with quiet confidence. As I dressed, my hands trembled, not from fear of being discovered, but from the weight of this small, courageous step. When I finally left the house, the air felt alive against my skin. The world outside seemed sharper, brighter, as if the city itself knew I was no longer hiding. The short walk to Miriam's apartment felt like a journey across an invisible bridge between my old self and the person I had always been meant to become. Every sound, the hum of passing cars, the distant laughter of children, the faint clink of glasses in nearby cafes, felt magnified like a soundtrack to a quiet but monumental victory. Miriam opened the door with her usual warm smile, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. "Adil, it's been forever," she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug before stepping back to look at me more closely. For a heartbeat, her gaze lingered, soft and curious, but she said nothing more than, "You look different. Happier." Her words wrapped around me like a gentle blanket. No judgment, no sharp questions, just simple, accepting observation. Inside, the apartment buzzed with soft music and the low murmur of friendly conversation. A handful of familiar faces turned to greet me, and though I braced for awkwardness, none came. People smiled, offered drinks, asked about my work and hobbies. Not a single person mentioned my appearance, though a few eyes flickered with subtle recognition of something new. Instead of fear, I felt a quiet pride bloom inside me. They saw me, maybe not the full story, but enough. As the evening unfolded, I found myself laughing more freely than I had in years. When Miriam introduced me to a new colleague of hers, a woman with bright eyes and an easy smile, I caught my reflection in the window behind her. The soft glow of the room highlighted the gentle curves of my chest beneath the lavender blouse. For a moment, I simply stared at myself. I didn't look like someone hiding a secret. I looked like someone alive. Later that night, as the gathering wound down, Miriam pulled me aside to the quiet corner of the kitchen. Her voice lowered to a careful softness. "I don't know what's changed," she said, "but you seem free. I've never seen you like this. Whatever it is, I'm proud of you." My throat tightened as I tried to respond. All I managed was a small, heartfelt thank you. Her words meant more than she could have known. They weren't just kind. They were a quiet validation of everything I had fought for. Walking home under the glow of streetlights, I replayed the evening in my mind. The laughter, the smiles, the absence of fear. For years, I had imagined that living authentically would mean endless explanations or harsh judgments. Instead, it felt like breathing after holding my breath for far too long. My steps felt lighter, my heart steadier. The days that followed carried that same quiet strength. I began venturing out more often, exploring parts of the city I had once avoided. Cafes, bookstores, small clothing boutiques. Spaces that once felt threatening now welcomed me like open doors. Each outing was a small act of defiance against the years I spent hiding, a silent declaration that I belonged exactly as I was. One afternoon, while browsing through a shop filled with soft fabrics and warm light, I caught sight of a pastel blue dress displayed near the entrance. Something about it called to me. The gentle drape of the fabric, the way it seemed to hold a promise of calm confidence. My heart pounded as I took it to the fitting room. Standing before the mirror, I slipped the dress over my shoulders, the fabric settling softly against my skin. The reflection that greeted me stole my breath. It wasn't just the dress. It was the way it framed the curves of my chest, the way my eyes shone as I took in the person staring back. For a long moment, I stood there in silence, absorbing the truth of what I saw. This was not disguise. This was not fantasy. This was me, living in the light I had always longed for. When I finally stepped out of the fitting room, the shopkeeper gave me a kind smile. "It suits you," she said simply. No hesitation, no judgment, just recognition. That night, as I carefully hung the dress in my wardrobe, I realized how much my life had shifted in such a short time. My new breasts were not just a physical change. They were a doorway to experiences I had once thought impossible. They gave me the courage to step into spaces I had feared, to accept kindness from strangers, to claim beauty in my own reflection. I lay in bed, the soft fabric of the dress brushing against my fingertips, and thought about the road still ahead. There would be challenges, conversations with family, the occasional sideways glance from strangers, but I no longer felt trapped by those possibilities. For the first time, the future felt like an open horizon rather than a locked door. As sleep began to pull me under, I whispered into the quiet room, "This is my life now. My real life." The words settled over me like a gentle vow, carrying the steady promise of mornings yet to come. The morning that followed felt different from all the others, as if the air itself carried a quiet certainty. Sunlight streamed through my window in soft golden beams, resting on the pastel blue dress I had hung so carefully the night before. I rose slowly, stretching in the glow of a room that no longer felt like a hiding place but a home. My chest felt tender beneath my pajamas, a subtle reminder of the journey that had brought me here. I pressed my hand lightly over my heart and whispered to myself, I made it. That day was reserved for something I had been postponing for far too long, a visit to my family. I hadn't told them about the procedure. I hadn't shared the nights of planning, the quiet fears, or the exhilaration of finally claiming my body as my own. I knew there would be questions, maybe even resistance, but I also knew I couldn't stay silent forever. They deserved to know the truth, and I deserved to live it. The walk to my parents' house was filled with a heavy calm. I wore the same lavender blouse from Miriam's gathering, paired with a soft gray cardigan that offered both warmth and a sense of quiet strength. Each step on the familiar path carried a weight of memories, childhood laughter, secret longings, years of quiet pretending. By the time I reached the front door, my heart was pounding like a drum. My mother opened the door, her warm eyes lighting up at the sight of me. "Adil," she said softly, pulling me into an embrace. For a long moment, I simply held her, breathing in the scent of home. When she stepped back, her gaze lingered on me, her eyes narrowing slightly in a way only a mother can. "You look different," she said carefully. I smiled, my throat tightening. "I feel different," I replied. "Better. Happier." She tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her eyes, but she said nothing more. Inside, my father greeted me with his usual calm, offering tea and small talk about the weather. I sat with them, the familiar rhythms of family life wrapping around me like a soft quilt. And then, when the conversation settled into a quiet lull, I took a deep breath. "There's something I need to share," I began, my voice trembling despite my resolve. "Something important about who I am." They both turned toward me, their faces open but cautious. I told them about the years of hiding, the quiet nights of self-discovery, the decision to finally align my body with my truth. I didn't share every detail, but I spoke with honesty, letting the words flow like water finally breaking through a dam. When I finished, silence filled the room. My father's brow furrowed slightly, his eyes searching mine. My mother reached for my hand, her touch warm and steady. "We may not fully understand," she said softly, "but you are our child. We love you. That will never change." Tears blurred my vision as I squeezed her hand. My father nodded, his expression serious but kind. "Your happiness is what matters," he said simply. In that moment, every fear I had carried for years seemed to dissolve like mist in the morning sun. The rest of the visit passed in gentle conversation. There were still questions, still moments of uncertainty, but the love beneath it all remained unshaken. When I finally left, the sky had turned a soft shade of rose, the evening air cool against my skin. I walked home with a lightness I had never known, each step a quiet celebration of acceptance, both theirs and my own. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a rhythm that felt almost magical in its simplicity. I began wearing clothes that once existed only in my private dreams, soft blouses, flowing dresses, colors that reflected the brightness I finally felt inside. I met friends for coffee without fear, visited shops with an easy smile, and even joined a local art class where I painted vibrant scenes of open skies and endless horizons. Every small act of daily life became a reminder of the freedom I had fought to claim. But perhaps the most profound change was internal. My new breasts, once just a symbol of transformation, became a natural part of me, as ordinary and extraordinary as my own heartbeat. I no longer measured my worth by how closely I matched an imagined ideal. Instead, I found strength in the simple truth that I had chosen this path for myself, not for anyone else. One quiet evening, as I sat by my window with a cup of tea, I thought about the long road behind me, the secret nights of dressing in hidden rooms, the trembling hand that signed the clinic forms, the gentle recovery filled with both pain and joy. Every moment, every decision, had led me to this calm, this undeniable sense of belonging. I traced the rim of my cup and smiled at the reflection in the glass. "My new breasts," I whispered softly. "My new life." The words felt like a prayer and a promise all at once. A reminder that transformation is not about leaving behind who you were, but about embracing who you have always been. I no longer needed to hide, to explain, or to seek approval. My journey was my own, and it had brought me home. As the night deepened and the stars began to scatter across the sky, I felt a peace settle over me. A peace so deep it felt like the quiet heartbeat of the universe itself. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for a future that might never come. I was already living it, fully and beautifully, one breath, one step, one heartbeat at a time.